Good evening. I'm very glad you're here and not on your way to the Armory in a black tie for an event that I can promise you won't be nearly as interesting as this one's going to be. However, it has snarled traffic, so you will see people drifting in. I'm Ann Kirshner. Welcome to Roosevelt House. Thanks for joining us tonight for the launch of a brand new series, Mapping the Future of Higher Education. Let me start with a special welcome to our co-hosts, Macaulay Honors College, and warm thanks to my friend and fellow traveler in all things relating to education, Tony Meyer, and his family, the Meyer family. And a special shout out to CUNY Chancellor Felo Matos Rodriguez, with extra thanks for bringing me back to CUNY. So thank you. So here we are at Roosevelt House. This is Hunter's home for policy, for history, for human rights. So why am I launching this program here? Two reasons. The first is that the future of education is a vital issue of history and human rights and policy. And it's of major direct and sort of interestingly personal significance to everyone in this room. After all, we've all been students. Some of us are probably still students. And we consider learning, those of us who think we're lifelong learners, we consider learning to be one of the food groups, like eat your broccoli and have some protein in your diet and stay hydrated. Education for me is sort of a wellspring of my life. It's where I feel like something very deep in my identity was formed. So more than most policy matters, education has this really highly personal and emotionally layered dimension. And then there's the economic realities. Education is expensive. And even when we say it's a free education, after all, somebody is paying for it, and that's usually the taxpayer. And then there's the final aspect, of course, because these days education is political. So tonight we're going to be focusing on one particular slice of higher education. If we think of higher education as a jigsaw puzzle, there's one piece that used to be really kind of small, and we really didn't talk about it very much. And now it looms large to the point where it begins to dominate the whole puzzle, and that is the intentional and explicit and carefully structured link between college and careers. And that piece, which was once more or less an afterthought, has an enormous impact on students' lives and how the public views higher education. Take a look at any survey on higher education, and you will see that there is increasing public skepticism about the value of higher education. So there's a direct correlation between that piece, the economic and the career factors, and all those other dimensions, the political, the economic, and the emotional. The second reason why we're in Roosevelt House tonight is a lot shorter. I love this building. Imagine we're in the home of Eleanor and Franklin D. Roosevelt, a wedding gift given to them by Franklin's mother, Sarah, who bought herself the house right next door. Imagine how much fun that was for Sarah. And when the Roosevelts were ready to leave this house, it became part of Hunter College, an arrangement that pleased them very much and certainly pleased the college very much. Okay, one more thing before I move on to tonight's main event. You're soon going to be receiving an invite to the second part of this series. There will be 4, maybe 5 in total, and that will be Ben Wildofsky, who's going to be talking about his new book from Princeton Press. And as Ryan pointed out, he's going to say completely the opposite from everything that Ryan's going to talk about tonight. His book is called The Career Arts, Making the Most of College Credentials and Connections. And he'll be in conversation with Daphne Kiss, who heads up World Quant University and is an entrepreneur and investor in ed tech. Okay, now let me introduce our 2 special guests, 2 extraordinary experts in higher education, Ryan Craig and Melissa Korn. Ryan is a managing director at Achieve Partners. They are investors in higher education. Ryan's commentary on where the puck is going in higher education and workforce regularly appears in his biweekly Gap letter, in Forbes, and Inside Higher Education, and I urge you all to follow it. He's the author of A New You, Faster and Cheaper Alternatives to College. Before that, College Disrupted, The Great Unbundling of Higher Education. And now he's here to talk about his new book, Apprentice Nation. Ryan began his career at McKinsey, and his previous experience in higher education, which was at Columbia University, where he and I were partners in the creation of Fathom, one of the very first online learning companies way back in the last century. Doesn't that feel weird to say? 1999. And since we're talking about education, Ryan received bachelor's degrees and a law degree from Yale University. I'm only saying that because we're talking about education. Melissa Korn is one of the best journalists covering higher education. Her work in the Wall Street Journal is a must-read. She's been there since 2014. She covers college admissions, the college to career pathway, which is a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, and campus culture. Actually, when I say campus culture, I have to grimace a little bit because the last couple of weeks have been very, very difficult in campus culture. She won awards from the New York Press Club and the Newswomen's Club of New York for her investigative series on student debt, and she's the co-author of a wonderful and important book on the college admission scandal called Unacceptable: Privilege, Deceit, and the Making of the College Admission Scandal. They're making a movie yet? Ooh. Oh, excellent. Oh, breaking news right here. Melissa graduated from Cornell with degrees in English, and history, and has a master's degree from Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. They will both be signing books upstairs after their talk. And I turn it over to you with great thanks for kicking off this new series, Melissa and Ryan.
Gosh, I feel like I should be in the audience and not the one up here. So Ryan and I are going to have a bit of a conversation. I'm going to ask him some questions. He's going to probably ask me some as well.
Turn the tables on you.
Yes. We've known each other for a while now. I was looking back in my email. I think it was 2016 was one of our first meetings. So it's been a few years. I figured we could start on a light note here and talk about everything that's wrong with higher education as we know it. We don't have a ton of time to do that, but if we go like rapid fire, I feel like we could get through some of it. No, but seriously, higher education in the traditional sense is changing rapidly. It is under fire politically. There are financial concerns for institutions and for students. There are questions about the value. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the ways in which the system is perhaps a little broken, and then we'll talk about some of the solutions, because it wouldn't be much fun if we just stopped at the bad stuff. So, Ryan, when you think about kind of some of the challenges facing this industry right now, and I'm talking four-year college degrees as well as community colleges, what are some of the big things on your radar?
Yeah, well, look, I've been talking about this for years now, so rather than repeat sort of a litany of complaints, suggestions, helpful constructive criticism, the metaphor that I use in my new book is that in an open digital economy, colleges are still largely closed to the economy, which is a problem specifically with regard to helping graduates launch careers. They're good at helping graduates launch careers as academics. They're good at selling them another degree, but they're not so good at helping them, below. And again, when we talk about higher education, we're not talking about the schools we went to, which is a difficult. And one of the problems with this is that many of the people who are most interested in this topic attended those schools. So it's sort of hard to have that conversation without being self-aware of that. I'm very aware. However, it's the other 95% of students who are attending Hunter and CUNY and University of Texas El Paso and state schools and non-selective private schools and community colleges around the country. And by being closed in terms of the academic programs they're offering, so for example, take a look at the programs that are being offered. They are not dissimilar from the programs that were on offer when you attended, and maybe when your parents attended, if they attended. That's maybe there's a data science program, maybe there's a cybersecurity program, maybe there's some new interdisciplinary program, but they haven't changed nearly at the pace of the economy, which has undergone a digital transformation. And most of the good jobs that college graduates aspire to are digital jobs. And so that's a problem. It's closed in terms, colleges are closed in terms of the faculty who are delivering these programs. The vast majority of these faculties, of faculty have terminal degrees, which mean that most of them have never worked outside of higher education. They've never worked in the private sector. The idea of connecting students to careers outside of higher education is not something that they're expert in. They're closed off in terms of accountability. Boards of trustees internally as well as externally with accreditors are not focused on metrics around the success of their graduates. Most schools, the most they'd be able to tell you is 9 months after graduation, 90% of our graduates are employed or in graduate school, but they can't tell you more than that. They don't know where they're employed. Are they working at Starbucks? So that's a problem. So if I were to summarize, I would say closed is the big, and look, we understand why, right? Universities emerged in the Middle Ages as they needed to be closed because it was a dangerous world. It's still a dangerous world, as we've seen. But it's also dangerous for graduates to graduate from a closed institution that don't have these connections to an open digital economy.
I'm going to take one of the things that you said from our conversation yesterday in preparation for this, that kind of the colleges that you and I went to, those types of schools, right? Very selective 4-year schools with a residential experience for people generally aged 18 to 22. They're kind of like debutantes, right? That's not a thing you do very much anymore. And only fairly wealthy people with a certain pedigree have the opportunity to do that. And that is not what most college students look like today. That is not what most employers need today. Think about just the student population in CUNY is much more representative of the general student population than certainly either school you or I went to. I should say schools, I guess, in terms of not being 19 years old, full-time, enrolled, not working or maybe working part-time and going on the bank of mom and dad, right? That's just not the way it works anymore, yet the institutions still work that way.
Yeah, to be fair, on the record, I don't think they're debutantes today, and they certainly don't feel like debutantes to the 20% of students at those institutions who are Pell recipients, right? So they do have there's a population there that they are serving, that they are elevating.
20% is generous at some of those
Well,
schools.
20% of a very small number. So we can talk about that. The number of students these institutions actually serve as a percentage of the population, because it is far lower than every other developed country if you look at the elite universities. But I do think that, and we'll talk more about this, as we begin to develop more of an alternative infrastructure as opposed to the accredited post-secondary institution infrastructure that we've invested in over the past century, that for many, it may feel like that. Like, oh, that's kind of expensive and old-fashioned, and why would I do that when I have an earn and learn pathway that will lead me directly into a career, and from whence I can now decide what credential I want to earn, when I want to earn it, without any pressure or fear of making a bad life-altering or life-destroying decision.
You mentioned earlier, a lot of the people who write about and think about higher ed are folks who went to that small sliver of schools. What incentive is there to open up beyond the accredited traditional program that generally exists today? Why should they want to? Why should policymakers want to? Perhaps need to?
Yeah, well, look, I think at the elite schools, it's very clear there is no internal or external pressure to grow enrollment. Yale just added 2 residential colleges at a cost of $800 million, 800 students they've added. Great for those 800 students, but not moving the needle in terms of economic opportunity or socioeconomic mobility for the country. But I feel like the issue is broader than that. Higher education, even our public university system, has essentially outsourced an inexpensive on-ramp to four-year degrees to community colleges. And in an era of online education, there's absolutely no reason why community colleges should be required to play that transfer role to four-year institutions. Community colleges should be allowed to focus on a workforce mission, as opposed to have this schizophrenic existence of serving as an academic transfer institution to four-year degrees and also serving a workforce mission. And so that's also, I think, part and parcel of this not opening up and recognizing that, you know, they have a responsibility beyond making their enrollment numbers or meeting their budget for the year. I think that too many post-secondary, there's been a lot of focus from a policy standpoint over the last 20 years on for-profit colleges and universities, and there have been tons of abuses there. But nonprofit and public institutions have gotten away with a lot, in my view, and I know you're writing as well, in terms of, you know, are they meeting the spirit, the letter of their mission? Maybe, but are they meeting the spirit of it? Probably not.
Right. For-profit doesn't mean for evil, and nonprofit doesn't mean, I don't know, non-evil, I guess, pure in intention and goals. Let's switch a little bit to some solutions here. So you guys are all going to see Ryan's book. It is fantastic. Strongly recommend reading it. I sat down for a weekend and poured through it. I did. That's kind of what I do on my weekends. I want to start at the very beginning here and have you define apprenticeship, because you are not suggesting that we have a nation of plumbers or HVAC technicians. We need them, but you are not saying everyone should go that route.
No, that's part of the problem. One of the reasons why I think we haven't invested in a equivalent or even proximate infrastructure for earn and learn pathways is that for most people or policymakers, decision makers, it's synonymous with roofers, plumbers, and welders, and that's, you know, a problem. The reality is that the good digital jobs that college graduates want, trying to get, increasingly can't get, are jobs that are looking for specific technical skills, platform skills, digital skills that are actually harder to learn in a classroom than they are by doing. And so,
what are some examples of those?
Oh, sure. I mean, look at you know, an entry-level claims adjuster for an insurance company. If you look at the job description, they're going to be asking for experience with the insurance claim platform, right? If you're going to work for an organization in a sales or marketing role, they're going to be asking for Salesforce experience. A few years ago, I was at a forum like this with college and university presidents, and I asked them to raise your hand if your institution provides any coursework at all on Salesforce. And well, first of all, I think many of them didn't know what Salesforce was. But, you know, not one hand went up in the room, and that's a problem. And that's what I mean about being closed off. So apprenticeship, apprenticeship 101, these are not training programs. These are not boot camps. They're not even workforce programs. They're jobs, first and foremost, right? If you haven't been hired by an employer and are receiving a W-2, you're not an apprentice. I don't know what you are. You might be enrolled in some kind of a training program. Maybe they call it a pre-apprenticeship something, but it's not an apprenticeship program. An apprentice is a full-time employee who's being paid. So that's the first thing. And so what do you need to do? What do you need for that? So the bottleneck, obviously, is not a training program or curriculum. It's an employer willing to hire someone who, by definition, is not yet productive or proficient in their job. So for plumbers and welders, it's easier because on day one of the job, plumbers and welders can follow Joe around. They can hold the tools, they can, you know, assist and kind of learn as they go. And technically what an apprenticeship is, or historically, you're doing a day a week, 1 out of 5 days, of formal learning. You're learning on the job, and then 1 day a week you're in a formal learning environment. You're in a classroom environment for 3, 4, 6, 8 hours a day. So that's an apprenticeship. But, you know, for digital jobs, for the skills that are hard to learn in a classroom, to close that skills gap, and more important, to close what we're seeing increasingly is this experience gap, which is that, so if you look at cybersecurity, entry level, I want to break into cybersecurity. A decade ago, you could be hired as a tier 1 cybersecurity analyst and going to work at a managed security service provider. And your kind of first, row of defense, you're seeing the alerts as they come in, and you're deciding like what to elevate, what not to elevate. And that actually was a job that you could, get with some technical skills out of college. Today, those tier 1 analyst jobs really don't exist anymore because that has kind of been automated, right? AI, or sort of what's coming, is doing a lot of that basic work. And so if you look at what entry-level jobs in cybersecurity are asking for today, they're asking for certifications that you cannot get without 2 or 3 years experience in the sector. And that's what AI is going to do to entry-level jobs across the economy. It's going to think back to your first good job, wherever it was, assuming your first good job was not in higher education. If you worked in the private sector outside higher education. I'm thinking back to my first job. Half of it was developing presentations that in a year AI is going to do 90% of that work. So maybe that was 50% of my time doing scut work, menial work that AI will be able to do. Employers are going to expect in a few years that entry-level workers will be productive and proficient and able to do work that today you'd need a couple years worth of experience to do, right? Sort of client development, research, so forth. Like, you wouldn't expect someone to be able to do that in their first year of the job. But what else are they going to do? Because all of that menial work is going to be done by technology. So employers, all jobs are going the way of cybersecurity jobs today. Employers are going to expect experience in order to get a good first job in these companies. And apprenticeship is obviously, has to be a major part of the solution to do that. There are other things colleges and universities can do to integrate experience into, programs of study. We can talk about that. But apprenticeship is going to be a big part of the answer. And it's not just something that is, the province of plumbers and welders and roofers.
So we're starting to see employers drop their degree requirements for jobs, right? You must have a bachelor's. We expect a bachelor's and 5 years of experience. Maybe now they just expect the 5 years of experience, which is still a huge hurdle. Are we going to see them drop the degrees entirely in favor of this potentially? Or are we going to see, we want somebody who just wants to learn, they don't need the 5 years of experience, they need a day of experience, and we'll hire them and we'll train them up?
Yeah, I've actually talked to Burning Glass about this, and I've asked them, they're actually going to do a study to look at employers that have dropped degree requirements from job descriptions and ask whether at the same time they've increased experience requirements. Because that's my suspicion. They've dropped the degree requirement, they've increased the experience requirement, and the end result is no major improvement for young people in terms of career opportunity.
Let's talk a little bit about this being a fairly unique American issue. There, in the book, you talk about kind of the models that a number of other countries use and why some parts of them may work here in the States, some parts of them won't. So kind of, if you can, in a very brief way, talk about kind of what this Frankenstein apprenticeship program would look like. Right,
and what are we doing wrong? So I'll save you the time. You don't have to read the book now. But everyone will get a free copy of the book. So you can put it on your bookshelf. So as a country, we have 500,000 registered apprentices now, which sounds like a lot. Translates into 0.3% of the workforce, and 70% of those are in construction. As you'd expect, Germany, Austria, Switzerland are about 15 times better than us in terms of, on a per capita basis, in terms of apprentices as a percentage of the workforce. So obviously in those countries, it's not just plumbers and roofers and welders. You are launching your career across the economy with apprenticeships. What was surprising and what really prompted me to write the book was, if you look at the UK and Australia in particular, but also Canada and France, those countries 20 or 30 years ago looked a lot like the US in terms of having a relatively small apprenticeship system, small, low-level apprenticeship infrastructure, and localized to the construction trades. What have they done? So today, all those countries are 8x where we are on apprenticeship. So that was surprising to me. So what have they done? Well, they funded it. They funded it and recognized the importance, I think, for many of the reasons we've talked about. So in those countries now, it is very common to launch a career in financial services or healthcare or technology or logistics through an apprenticeship, whether or not you have a degree. So again, apprenticeships are not necessarily only a substitution for degree programs. There can be apprenticeship on-ramps for university graduates, for graduates of graduate and professional programs as well, who otherwise would not have the specific skills that really can only be learned on the job to access these digital jobs. How do they do it? Funding for one. So in the US, we spend taxpayer dollars, federal and state, over $500 billion a year on colleges and universities. And I'm not counting the loan forgiveness that was struck down and is now sort of back on the table again in different form. And I'm not counting the shift to a much more generous income-driven repayment program, which I'm sure you've covered skeptically. That's another $475 billion. So just annual operating budget of our higher education system is about $500 billion. We spend, as a nation, public dollars, taxpayer dollars, less than $400 million on apprenticeship. So that's over 1,000 to 1 ratio. If you look at a individual college student and compare that college student to a working apprentice, and you say, well, how much public support are these people receiving? For every dollar the apprentice is receiving, the college student gets $50. So I don't know whether the right ratio is 1 to 1, 2 to 1, 5 to 1, 10 to 1, but it sure ain't 50 to 1 or 1,000 to 1. So that's a problem, particularly, if you could imagine an apprenticeship, because it's a paying job. In theory, it is it's a more level playing field, right? You're not asking someone to, have the resources to take on loans and debt and, have the family support structure so it can support them while they're going to, school and full time. These are jobs. So anyway, no other country is nearly as out of balance as we are in that regard. So we have spent a century building up this massive post-secondary education infrastructure, one way of launching careers, and we've done very little in terms of establishing an alternative earn and learn pathway to launching careers. And at a time where the skills necessary and the experience required to launch careers are becoming increasingly challenging and will become more challenging, it's imperative that we get this right.
So I think one of the arguments against kind of beefing up apprenticeships is that you're going to force kind of a two-track system, right? Where people with means and with information and an understanding of the system, of the current system, can go and do the kind of traditional pathway for a degree. And everyone else who doesn't have means gets kind of shunted off into an apprenticeship. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing necessarily, but do you see that happening?
Well, no one likes shunting, so I'm against shunting. But
Gently moved.
Well, it's choice, I think, is the operative word. So right now there is no choice. By and large, if you want to launch a career, we have one pathway in this. Aside from becoming a social media influencer or so forth, which is like astonishingly what 40% of Gen Z wants to become. So good luck to that. They absolutely.
Sorry, the two pathways.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Shunting.
So we don't want shunting. We do want choice. So we want the vision is, you could imagine your high school guidance counselor having, in addition to their Naviance system with thousands of colleges and universities in there, also having thousands of earn and learn opportunities, apprenticeship programs that are available, and having a informed discussion with the high school senior as to which pathway makes most sense. You're absolutely right that some, and it's likely, at least in the near term, that the most wealthy and informed will continue to choose the pathway that requires the most near-term investment and perhaps the highest risk, which is a tuition-based, debt-based pathway. But for many students, first-generation underrepresented students, an earn and learn pathway where they have, and again, the definition, you're making a living wage, you have built-in sort of escalator of wages as you become more productive, and clear career pathways that come out of it. So it's not a dead end. You can't have an apprenticeship that's sort of a dead end job. That is going to be extremely attractive to millions of young people who today are not being well served by the system in terms of college completion or graduating into underemployment. That's a problem. And I think that the other point is that we have in the sort of higher education enrollment process a real problem with what I call asymmetric information. And by that I mean, you take student A with a given profile, a college or university ought to, if it either does know or ought to know, whether or not that student enrolling in this program is a good idea for that student, right? Has someone like that been, what are the 100 students who share these characteristics, have they been successful in the past in terms of completion and employment outcomes? The student has no earthly idea whether they've been, so it is kind of like a used car situation. The guy selling the used car, knows, or ought to, maybe they're willingly blind. This is a great car. The customer has no idea what the sort of story with this used car is. So, one way to solve that is disclosure, which is sort of where this administration is on this issue. They're requiring, well, not for all institutions. For some institutions, some select privileged institutions will be required to have students sign a disclosure if they're enrolling in a program that does not meet certain return requirements. Hunter's not going to have to worry about that. So, but the other way to do it is to provide pathways that will give these students, aspiring career launchers, a better place to make a decision. Right? Let them work for a few years. Let them develop a sense of their own interests and capabilities, and then make a more informed decision about your higher education future. I think for the same reason that we don't hear much complaining about people being ripped off in terms of their master's degrees, right? Like by the time you're in a place to enroll in a master's degree program, you probably have a pretty good idea of what you want, what you need. You're a more informed consumer. Bachelor's degree customers are not particularly well-informed consumers, or most of them aren't. Certainly the ones we care about are not. So rather than having this sequence where we say the pathway to launch is high school to college to work, to the point where employment rates of teens and college students are like at record lows at this point. So like you shouldn't work. You should focus entirely in high school on getting your application, getting all the volunteering in Costa Rica and saving the rainforest and so forth, putting those on your college application. Like that's the focus. And in college also, not employment is not a huge concern, as demonstrated by federal policy. We can talk about the federal work study program. So that's challenging.
You mentioned the information kind of inequity, and last month was at this annual conference for college admissions officers and guidance counselors for high schools, right? So that is an opportunity for them to talk to each other about, hey, this is what my students need, this is what we're looking for, all of that. First of all, apprenticeships, not mentioned once. There was a lot of discussion about affirmative action and where do we go from here, and can we have a more diverse student population? Not are the students that we send to these schools going to get jobs later. That's kind of secondary or tertiary discussion. But there were high school counselors saying, I need to be able to tell my students more about the ROI, right? They are asking about the value. And I do want to ask where some of the kind of more traditional liberal arts degrees come into play here. And if people who are going through apprenticeships just completely bypass some of that element of education, right? Before we came downstairs, we were talking a little bit about AI and kind of the jobs of the future. And, if there's something to be said for an engineer taking a philosophy class or history class and making sure they understand the context in which they're creating something new, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, I think of this in the context of triage, where, you have patients bleeding out on the table. Let's focus, like, first things first, you got to stabilize the patient. So I agree, philosophy class, great for an engineer to have, but what's more important is that they actually come out of school, they complete the program, and they get a good first job. So I think the idea that somehow this all has to be done, all in one fell swoop is we don't think about that really in any other aspect of our lives. We get what we need when we need it, right?
And I'm a very impatient person. I expect this like next week. So
Right. It's I think liberal arts programs at colleges and universities will need to figure out how to address this experience gap problem. And I'm not talking about the elite schools. All of those kids are going to be fine because they're going to be hired because they're employers who recognize that, like, there's talent there and worth investing in. I'm talking about the other 95%. So how can a college and university help close that experience gap in a liberal arts program, or really any other program? Apprenticeship is obvious. If they could figure out how to create pathways into apprenticeships, that's one way to do it. Right now, we don't have the apprenticeship infrastructure that's a scalable solution. But other solutions include internships, which schools like Northeastern have demonstrated. It is possible to build a broad-based co-op program and engage employers and ensure that students have 2, 3, 4 meaningful paid internship experiences before they graduate. And that's relevant. Employers are going to look at that, and maybe, likely, they'll be hired by one of those companies they worked for over the course of their degree program. But today at most schools, internships are informal, relationship-based, catch as catch can. No one has really done a good job of systematizing or formalizing internships. And again, closed colleges aren't set up to engage employers in that way, mostly. I've written extensively about career services, and that's like the window, the narrow window through which colleges look at the world of work and employers. And career services offices are, quite happy to have the Handshake platform with millions of jobs available and kind of brush their hands and say, "Our students are taken care of." But they're not focused on the outcomes. The other way to close that experience gap from a college and university standpoint is to do what's called work-integrated learning, which is where you, and this is probably technology mediated, you have real projects from real employers that faculty are able to select from and integrate into coursework as capstone experiences in their courses.
we see those in business schools already, certainly, but
Yeah.
you think it can happen in other
Well, I mean,
areas as well?
what happens in business schools 10 years later is happening at the undergraduate level. We've seen that's where online education originated, and so I think you said that. So, yeah, absolutely, I think, but again, the question is, it's a lot easier to incorporate a real work project from a real employer as a capstone experience in a digital marketing course than it is in a ancient Greek and Roman history course. So I think faculty are going to need to think differently. And unfortunately, I talk about in the book, faculty aren't good at thinking differently. They're very happy doing the things the way they have been doing. For example, we know that teaching via lecture is a very ineffective way of teaching, and yet something like 80% of faculty continue to teach that way, as opposed to moving to more of an active learning model. So, do you believe that colleges and universities are going to get on their game suddenly and do it? The answer is no. My answer is no, not until students vote with their feet and stop enrolling in those institutions, and schools, probably on a top-down basis, are telling faculty, no, we have to do things differently now. And so I think one of the benefits of this vision of an apprentice nation is that by having having competition to our current, tuition-based, debt-based, post-secondary institution system of career launch, we can't not improve the performance of these institutions. And again, I think the elite schools are going to be immune from this, and they'll do their own thing. But the other 95% of institutions that have completion rates of 30%, and where of those who complete, 50% are underemployed. So you can do the math. Something like 60-70% are experiencing negative outcomes from their decision to enroll in those institutions. That we're going to do better than that. These schools will be forced to change.
Speaking of active and engaged learning, I do believe we're going to take some questions. So if you have any, think about them. I have one more question for you right now. What is the first step that the powers that be should take in order to start building this infrastructure? I don't know if it's at the federal level, state, city level, employers. What's step one here?
Yeah, I mean, so I love what I do because I get to help contribute in a small way to building this infrastructure, then have discussions state and federal level with policymakers on these things. So we've already played a role. I've helped create this nonprofit called Apprenticeships for America, which is a trade association of apprenticeship intermediaries. It's very small because our apprenticeship infrastructure is very small. But through our work, we've already helped convince California to provide the first formula-based funding for apprenticeships. So one problem is we're not funding enough. The other problem is to the extent we're funding apprenticeships, we're funding it wrong. The Department of Labor is giving individual grants, trying to pick winners who may or may not create apprenticeships. What they've been doing is giving these grants to community colleges, by and large, also workforce boards, that develop curriculum, maybe buy some equipment and sit on their hands and wait for an employer to come along and say, we'd like to use your curriculum for our apprenticeship program. That's not how apprenticeship programs are created. Apprenticeship programs are created by active, high-intervention intermediaries that knock on doors of employers and offer to set up and run their programs for them. Now, employers don't run their own programs. Not in Germany, not in the construction sector. Those are unions. In Germany, it's chambers of commerce. So it's really all about the role, the nub of the book is the role of the intermediary. It's not going to be waiting for employers to do this on their own, waiting for community colleges and universities to solve the problem won't happen. The reason the UK and Australia have leapfrogged us is because they, even 20 years ago, began investing in creating a robust ecosystem of apprenticeship intermediaries that do that heavy lifting and essentially make it seamless for most employers to have apprenticeship programs. In many cases, they're the employers of record, taking the risk on the talent until the talent becomes productive and then passing the talent off to the employer. So that's how you get 8X. That's how you get apprenticeship pathways into financial services, healthcare, technology, logistics, and so forth. So we've been funding it wrong. We need to fund more, and we need to move from this grant-based funding to predictable formula-based funding, which is how we built our higher education infrastructure, right? The funding flows with the student. Funding should flow with the apprentice. And that's what's happened in the UK and Australia. For every apprentice that gets hired and trained, these intermediaries get paid, essentially. And the return on investment to the government is excellent. So we haven't figured that out. We're going to figure it out. So we've played a role. California, just last fall, announced the first formula-based funding for apprenticeship, $175 million over the next 3 years in what they call apprenticeship innovation funding. And we believe other states are going to follow. At the federal level, I expect to see that starting on a sectoral basis. So Department of Commerce, for example, launching a performance-based funding for semiconductor manufacturing. So encouraging intermediaries to emerge. There are none today. There are no apprenticeship intermediaries for semiconductor fabs. We're going to see that. We're going to see that emerge over the next couple of years. And the goal is, again, over the next decade, to build this earn and learn infrastructure that may not rival our heart. I mean, my vision is as many apprentice jobs as there are seats in freshman classes across the country. But let's aim high, and the goal, the outcome will be positive for everyone.
Thank you so much. I don't know if there are questions yet. If there are, someone can raise their hand. Okay, we do have some. Do we have someone who can help with the mic? Oh, we've got mics in the back. Over there in the back.
Hello, thank you so much. Can you talk about ageism and the apprenticeships? So meaning an apprenticeship program nationally where people who are 40 and over enter.
I mean, yeah, we have such a shortage of apprenticeship infrastructure that it's one of the things that drives me crazy is that all the big nonprofits who are focused on apprenticeship are focused on youth. Like you talk to the Gates Foundation about apprenticeship. They'll say, oh, we love apprenticeship. We love youth apprenticeship. And youth apprenticeship means these kids are in high school and you have to convince an employer to hire these high school students, which is an order of magnitude more difficult than just building apprenticeship infrastructure. So my point is we need to get the basics right. We haven't even laid the tracks yet for this. Like once we begin to develop that infrastructure, we can develop the youth apprenticeship, programs we can, have for, older people. But right now, a 24-year-old with incredible potential, diverse first generation, but without the skills, there's no apprenticeship program. I mean, the back of the book, I have a directory of. I went through the 6,000 programs listed in the Department of Labor's apprenticeship database called RAPIDS that are not construction apprenticeships. So we went through all 6,000, and I asked, how many of these programs are actually real apprenticeships where you could apply for a job as an apprentice tomorrow at one of these programs? The answer is 200. So the other 5,800 are paper apprenticeship programs. They exist on paper, but there's no employer standing behind it. If there's curriculum, someone went to the trouble of registering it, they probably got a Department of Labor grant to do it, but they don't really exist. So it just shows you where we're starting from such a low level.
Next, over in the back corner there. Would you mind using the mic?
Thank you for that. Thank you for that presentation very much. I have a question. It sounds to me, and I'm trying to understand, you've said a lot, and I'm trying to understand exactly your position on the role or your projection of the role of the liberal arts in going forward in college. It sounds to me, or in the world, I mean, think about Plato. I don't know what job he had, but he made a fairly significant contribution. Think about teacher education. I mean, what is the value of that? But the question really is like, how do the liberal arts fit in? And it sounds to me like you're just talking about colleges being training, programs for industry. And certainly we need jobs and people to fill those jobs. But there are a lot of other factors that contribute to students perhaps not getting jobs, and it has to do with the economy and a lot of other, obviously. So I don't know if I made my question clear enough.
That is clear. That is clear. I mean, I guess I would
Thank
say,
you.
I'm sure Melissa has a point of view on this too. There will always be liberal arts programs for people who can afford them. The problem is, when you went to school, when I went to school, liberal arts programs were much more affordable, and you didn't graduate with 6 figures worth of debt and a liberal arts degree, a degree in individual studies or something, with no clear career trajectory. And that's unsustainable. That's a problem. So we're gonna, people who can afford it, great. There will be states and systems that subsidize these programs and make them available locally, but even then, even if they're free, you still have cost of living, you still have, so you have, in the free college world, you still have students taking out $30,000, $40,000 or more of student loans to support, not working and supporting themselves for the 4-year journey that they're on. So it's really an affordability. It becomes I guess liberal arts are essential, but I come back to the triage model. Like, they're not as essential as making sure that, every American feels like they have a pathway for economic opportunity. In this which is the problem we have. I think that much of the social and political challenge that we have is half the country feels like the thriving digital American economy is not accessible to them. Because I point to the song of the summer was this song by a Virginia singer-songwriter named Oliver Anthony called "Rich Men North of Richmond." And while conservatives have tried to adopt that as like their own. He was very clear. This is not about conservative, liberal. This is about young people who are outsiders who can't find a way in, can't find a path. And that's the challenge we have. We have to solve that problem first. So, as a country, if we don't solve that, we may not have a country to worry about a liberal arts in. So it's important, but it's not the most important thing in my view.
First of all, I'd like to thank Hunter College for putting this very thought-provoking program together, and for your book and your good questions. And I agree completely. We should have more career education, more apprenticeships. But every year we have these educational studies that come out on the economy, tying level of education to level of income.
I love those.
And they say, high school, you're going to be making this low amount of money. You get to college, you're going to make more. You go even higher, making it almost sound like to be successful, you not only have to have a college education, you have to have a master's degree or a doctorate. And they do these studies saying that it's tied to educational level. So I'd like a comment on that. And secondly, I think that government and universities and the private sector are taking internships much more seriously than they used to. Yeah. Now, for the first time, government requires paying your interns. Right. They used to be free. And even here at Hunter, I understand that they require that the interns be paid. And Hunter has created a number of programs that tie the internship not to academic work, but to real-life experience, like the Grove program and other programs that they've started that are really moving more in that direction. And another thing that this is not on your subject matter today, but I think it's an important one. No matter how much money government puts into education, the cost of education doesn't go down. The universities build a new gym or something else. I don't know what they do
Melissa
with it.
can talk about
but
that.
No matter
They buy a
how much
monastery
money
in
goes
Italy.
into education, the crushing cost to the young people is still there. And I've just got to say, you get a great education here at Hunter without going into debt.
I mean, that's
We help most of our Hunter Schools students work, and they graduate without debt. So I just wanted to.
Well, I think there are thousands of institutions that wouldn't host this conversation, so let's put it that way. Let me just say before you talk about the spending, that on your first point, the correlation between degrees and income. The other point is there was a study that came out last week that shows if you don't go to college, you're going to die. So no, seriously. I mean, that's basically what like the headlines were from that study, which is the ultimate conflation of correlation and causation, right? The fact of the matter is that the characteristics that make one able to attend and complete college are characteristics that contribute to good health, and the reverse is true, right? So no, I've never seen. First of all of that data around the college premium is a decade or more old, so it's not accounting for this, digital transformation concern that. Oh, sorry.
It's a lot about averages too, right?
Yeah, no, it's not. The data is not new, and I've never seen a study that has figured out how to deal with the self-selection, which is that somebody who is able to get themselves into and through college is somebody who either comes from a place where they have a great support network and resources, or is just such an incredibly talented individual. They were probably going to do quite well regardless. And so there's never been a randomized control study of the college degree premium. Not that there isn't a premium, but the idea that somehow it's $1.2 million, you get a degree, someone's handing you $1.2 million, that is a fallacy.
I'm going to give our friend Lynn Goldfarb the last question.
How do you deal with apprentices? How do you deal with the student who really doesn't know what he or she wants to do? How do you give them the ability to go around the college and find different things and make a choice? I know too many kids who've gone to college saying, I'm going to be a doctor. And then when they get there, they say, no, I really don't want to do that. But if you don't give them the opportunity before they start their apprenticeships, they don't have any way of finding a way of doing that. How would you suggest that?
No, you're absolutely right. Discovery is a casualty of this model. But I would say that, like liberal arts, it is but it's not a complete cast. So the other point is that, how much what kind of disservice are you doing a student who decides that they want to opts for a digital marketing apprenticeship, is making $40,000 a year plus benefits, learning and earning as they go, and decides after 2 years that they don't want to do that, right? Have you done that student a disservice relative to the status quo, which is you're enrolling them in a $40,000 a year degree program. They've taken on $50,000 worth of student loan debt, and after 2 years decide that they can't make it and so forth. So I would argue that it's not as though there's no discovery for that apprentice. They're discovering things about themselves, and they may discover that after 2 years, that they want to pursue that degree program and have that experience. My main point is one of sequencing. That I think that for millions of young people, particularly students we should most care about, they would be better served if we had hundreds of thousands or millions of earn and learn opportunities where they could at no sort of financial risk to themselves pursue a pathway and potentially delay that decision or opt out of that model and have a great career, but maybe not with the accoutrement of liberal arts that we all benefited from. But
And who would use the word accoutrement if they were not from the liberal arts? I mean, that's what I want to know. So I'm really curious. In the countries that have extensive apprenticeship programs, what happens to the universities?
Well, I mean, what's interesting is that in the UK today, you have universities who are trying to glom onto this apprenticeship trend by saying by participating in degree apprenticeship programs. So they're offering their degrees, and there are some degree apprenticeship programs that are real, meaning that the degree is integrated with the training that occurs in the apprenticeship program, and when you graduate from the apprenticeship to a real job, you get your degree. And then, as you'd expect, there are other degree apprenticeships, or apprenticeship degrees as we're calling them here, that are not real, that are universities trying to take advantage of apprenticeships to sell off-the-shelf online degrees that have no connection at all with the apprenticeship program, and the apprentice will complete their program and only be a third of the way through their online degree program. So that's a fake apprenticeship degree, but that's what we're seeing in the UK.
Well, we only want the real thing, whether it's real apprenticeships or real degrees. I don't know if you've caught the CUNY advertising campaign around New York City, but it's really a terrific one. I hope you will join us for a book signing upstairs. There are books available for free, and Melissa and Ryan will be signing them. And please join me in thanking our remarkable panelists.